Vampires are evil mythological beings who roam the world at night searching for people whose blood they feed upon. They may be the best known classic monsters of all. Most people associate vampires with Count Dracula, the legendary blood-sucking subject of Bram Stoker's epic novel, which was published in 1897. But the history of vampires began long before Stoker was born. Number 5. Vlad the Impaler. It's thought Bram Stoker named Count Dracula after Vlad Dracula, also known as Vlad the Impaler. Vlad was born in Transylvania, Romania. Some historians describe him as a just, yet brutally cruel ruler who valiantly fought off the Ottoman Empire. He earned his nickname because his favorite way to kill his enemies was to impale them on a wooden stake. According to legend, Vlad Dracula enjoyed dining amidst his dying victims and dipping his bread in their blood. Whether those gory tales are true is unknown. Many people believe these stories sparked Stoker's imagination to create Count Dracula, who was also from Transylvania, sucked his victim's blood, and could be killed by driving a stake through his heart. But according to Dracula expert Elizabeth Miller, Stoker didn't base Count Dracula's life on Vlad Dracula. Nonetheless, the similarities between the two Draculas are intriguing. Number 4. Mercy Brown. Mercy Brown may rival Count Dracula as the most notorious vampire. Unlike Count Dracula, however, Mercy was a real person. She lived in Exeter, Rhode Island, and was the daughter of George Brown, a farmer. After George lost many family members, including Mercy, in the late 1800s to tuberculosis, his community used Mercy as a scapegoat to explain their deaths. It was common at that time to blame several deaths in one family on the undead. The bodies of each dead family member were often exhumed and searched for signs of vampirism. When Mercy's body was exhumed and didn't display severe decay, not surprising since her body was placed in an above-ground vault during a New England winter. The townspeople accused her of being a vampire and making her family sick from her icy grave. They cut out her heart, burned it, then fed the ashes to her sick brother. Perhaps not surprisingly, he died shortly thereafter. Number 3. Real vampires. Although modern science has silenced the vampire fears of the past, people who call themselves vampires do exist. They're normal-seeming people who drink small amounts of blood in a perhaps misguided effort to stay healthy. Communities of self-identified vampires can be found on the internet and in cities and towns around the world. To avoid rekindling vampire superstitions, most modern vampires keep to themselves and typically conduct their feeding rituals, which include drinking the blood of willing donors in private. Some vampires don't ingest human blood but claim to feed off the energy of others. Many state that if they don't feed regularly, they become agitated or depressed. Vampires became mainstream after Dracula was published. Since then, Count Dracula's legendary persona has been the topic of many films, books, and television shows. Given the fascination people have with all things horror, vampires, real or imagined, are likely to continue to inhabit the earth for years to come. Number 2. Mistaken Identity. Nellie Vaughn, just 19 years old, she was buried in 1889 in West Greenwich, Rhode Island. Today, this so-called vampire is almost as famous as Mercy Brown, whose exhumption was covered by international newspapers. Vaughn's cemetery has frequently been visited, vandalized, and her headstone broken. But in his book, Food for the Dead, folklorist and vampire scholar Michael Bell presents evidence suggesting that Vaughn's is a case of mistaken identity, and that her contemporaries never accused or exhumed her. The superstition probably arose in the last half-century or so and may be a result of confusion with Mercy, who died nearby at a similar date and age, and the admittedly creepy epitaph on Vaughn's tombstone, "I am waiting and watching for you." Number 1. Are vampires real? Vampire superstition thrived in the Middle Ages, especially as the plague decimated entire towns. The disease often left behind bleeding mouth lesions on its victims, which to the uneducated was a sure sign of vampirism. It wasn't uncommon for anyone with an unfamiliar physical or emotional illness to be labeled a vampire. Many researchers have pointed to porphyria, a blood disorder that can cause severe blisters on skin that's exposed to sunlight, as a disease that might have been linked to the vampire legend. Some symptoms of porphyria can be temporarily relieved by ingesting blood. Other diseases blamed for promoting the vampire myth include rabies or goitre. When a suspected vampire died, their bodies were often disinterred to search for signs of vampirism. In some cases, a stake was thrust through the corpse's heart to make sure they stayed dead. Other accounts describe the decapitation and burning of the corpses of suspected vampires well into the 19th century. So in conclusion, and this of course being my own personal opinion, I'd say, like most cryptids, the fear is real. As for vampires, there are many more incidents that I obviously couldn't fit into a top 5. Some of them are unexplainable and mysterious. With what data we have on vampire-like attacks and incidents and the overreactions of mankind, it's 50-50. I imagine that if vampires are real, they are nothing like they are described in novels, movies, or television shows. I am Cryptid Creep. This has been another Creepy Cryptids. Thanks for watching.